My name is Mark Rivet. I am currently the assistant audio slash A2 for the Angelica National Tour of Hamilton, who is what it's just currently on hiatus until October.
What do you remember about the last day on tour? Like, how did you find out about all this pandemic stuff?
Well, we had been of course, everybody, we had been watching the news for a long time, and we were my girlfriend, who was an ASM on The Hangman at the time, she told me we just got a call. We think that they're going to close Broadway down, and we were in the middle of in the middle of a rehearsal. We do a lot of rehearsals on Hamilton, and we were like, "Why are we even rehearsing? Like, if Broadway's going to close, they're going to have to close us." And we had some meetings, like some full company meetings that bring us all together. And our company manager, who's really great, uh, brought us all together. And he's like, here's the information that we have. We're going to make sure that everything's safe. Here's the ways that the theater that we're in, at the time we were in Miami at the Arched Center. And they said, they had the Arched Center, because it's a very large, well-funded building. They had already put in some sanitation in place. So they were like, here's what we're doing to make sure you guys are safe. Don't worry about it. Everything's going to be fine. And then we kept kind of hearing some mumblings about, ooh, do we think that, because our next stop was supposed to be Jacksonville. And I had gotten a text from a friend who was working in Jacksonville, and she said, hey guys, I don't think you're coming here. I'm hearing that we should not expect to come into work. And then, sure enough, believe it was on a Friday, we got a phone call saying, "Hey, this is the last show that you're going to be doing." Or I believe it was actually like during, or maybe right after the show. They said, "Meet up in the gondolas." They said, "We're canceling the show tomorrow. We're canceling we had what they call an edge-a-ham on Hamilton. We have these student-only performances that are really great." And they said, we're canceling the Edge of Ham, and we're canceling, but I think we're still going to do the show. And then we did the show, and they said, we're canceling the rest of the shows for the remainder of the weekend, and you're coming in tomorrow, Saturday, to do a preliminary loadout, and then Sunday morning at 8 a.m., we're all going to come in and load the show out. And that's what we did. And we made some plans to make sure some things weren't just sitting on a hot truck for a while. But for the most part, we just loaded it out, and then not really sure of where we were going to go. I mean, no one was really sure, because we were supposed to do 2 weeks in Jacksonville, and that whole stop got canceled. And then we were supposed to do, I believe it was 5 weeks in Atlanta, or maybe 4 weeks, and they canceled the Atlanta stop like right away as well. And we're like, well, we don't know when we're going to come back. And then every date kept getting pushed farther and farther back. And our newest official estimate is that we won't go back to work until October at some point. So that'll be the next time. And actually, they've closed one of our other companies in San Francisco, and they're going to take up all of our stops that we're missing. They're going to make up all those stops on their first round of tours. So they're just sort of going to do that when they come back.
That's good. At least, they'll visit these cities, I guess.
It's good to know that, I don't have work until October. Great. Time to start looking for something else. Like I just now, because I'm in DC right now, I just got a job working for an event company here, working IT for them, because I do a lot of IT work. And so I'm going to do that until October, until they tell me what else. Yeah, it's an unsure moment, but the great thing about it is if you use it as an opportunity, then it's not wasted time. So right now, a lot of us are working on furthering our, just professional endeavors. I'm learning a lot more software now that I didn't have time for before. I'm learning a lot of new techniques now that I didn't know before. I'm just I'm trying to use this time to better myself and make myself more competent in things that I just necessarily wasn't before. So I'm using it as I think I'm thriving actually in this, as long as the money doesn't run out, I'll be fine. It's just, you got to keep the savings.
Definitely, especially if you
Yeah,
work in theater.
exactly. And as someone who comes from I've done theater my whole life. When I first started, I was in high school, and it's the only job I've ever done long term. I've worked at bike shops, I've done construction, I've worked in photo studios, and this is the job that I knew I always wanted to do. And it's always been a feast or famine ecosystem. It's always been one of those things that you worked on a show, and so you did your load-in week, and you got to that paycheck, and that was always a really great paycheck. And then some weeks it was 2 events that week, and so you maybe got 2 days worth of work out of it. So you always kind of knew that that was coming. You would get your big paycheck, and you knew you had to squirrel it away because lean months were coming. And so I did that, luckily. And so I hopefully have done enough of that to keep that going for quite some time. Because I mean, they do say that football will be back before we will. So if football's not coming back, I'm pretty sure we're going to come back out. I think we're going to be the last business to open. I think you're going to see everything else reopen fully before you ever see someone in a theater seat elbow to elbow with somebody else.
I think theater are still open, like in Korea or somewhere in Asia. I think they have.
Actually, yeah, there was one of the alumnus of Phantom is doing Phantom in Korea, which I think is, I mean, good on them for being able to do it. I mean, it's a rarity. Yeah, I mean, I would love to keep doing theater. Like, yeah, if they want me, I'll go to Korea to do theater. Plus, I'd love to go. Yeah, plus I'd love to go to Korea. So I think it's an awesome place. That whole area is just, I want to visit all of it. So.
Mark, why sound? I mean, there's so many different theater careers. What drew you to sound?
I started this whole journey in high school drama class, and someone needed to run the soundboard for the drama classes performance days. And me being an overachiever, we only had 3 hanging mics and a very small console. And me being overachiever, I tried to figure out every way to make it better, faster, include more things, do playback, do all that stuff. And that was where I think my love of, using that craft of things like that. I'd always been a musician for a long time. I've played in a few bands. I played in a ska band in high school. And I've always loved playing music. I sang in a choir and all that. And I always wanted to, I knew that sound was always the important, often overlooked aspect of any performance, any theater recording. It's nowadays we go into a theater, and good theater is when you don't notice the sound. Good theater sound is when you don't notice the sound. And I think that's true to an extent. I think there are aspects of theater that you don't want to show the audience. You don't want to show them all the work that goes into this thing. You don't want it to seem like the actors are perfect. You don't want to give them a movie sound. John Weston has this great mentality of, he wants the audience to lean forward and be engaged in the piece. And if you give them too much sound, they don't lean forward anymore, and they're not as engaged. And as I started to look into the people with those opinions, I started to agree with them. I said, the really great theater that I've seen, could I hear it? Could I understand it? That was number one. Like, did I get what the actor was saying? If I did, great. I went and saw a show. It was Amazing Grace on Broadway, and it was, I thought, a great show because I did not know they were wearing microphones, and I heard every single word they said. And it wasn't until they turned around with their back to me that I realized, oh, they are wearing microphones. You can tell, because when they turn around, the sound doesn't change. But it did sound like it was natural. It sounded like it was coming from them. And I loved that. And the more I ate that up, the more I knew. I had a friend growing up that I worked with, this gentleman, Drew Westfall. So smart, so artistic, so just the man understands things I could never hope to. And that was something that he was big on. He's like, theater is the hardest sound. That's why I'm doing it. Because anyone can, set up a bunch of mics in front of a band and make them sound good, make them sound great. Like that is, I'm not, dissing on that at all. But there's an element of take a very tiny microphone that the size is what matters and try and make it sound as good as you can. And then tape it to an actor that's sweating and yelling and a bunch of other actors that are around them making a lot of noise, and then pump sound onto that stage, and then take what's coming through that tiny, terrible microphone, which I'm not knocking theater mics, I think they're great, but in the grand scheme of things, I would love to tape, a Royer 121 to someone, but I can't, it's too big. And take all of that and pump it through speakers and have an audience member engage with it and cry because what they heard was so incredible. And that is something that requires so much to achieve. It requires passion and excellence and a constant strive to do the finest work you can do day after day. In Hamilton, our associate designer, Jason Crystal, is just one of the smartest, thoughtful people you'll ever meet. And one thing he told me, he wrote up this sort of the idea of Hamilton sound, like what do we stand for? What are our principles? Like, and one of the things is to be prepared. We are prepared for everything, because you never know what's going to happen in theater. It's always different. And that sound, like that idea is more the idea to stretch my muscles and show people that I'm good enough, Could I have done that with lighting? Sure. Could I have done that with carpentry? Sure. But when you're a carpenter, you build the set and then it's done. And you might move the set, but really like the creation of it is the art to it, When you're lighting, you're lighting designer and you design the lights because that is the art to it. And then the people who run it, and again, I'm not like taking away from their artistic merit, but the idea that sound every day is a different environment. Every place is a different place, especially touring sound. Every theater is a different theater and a different soundscape. Every actor sings the part a little differently and they do it differently every day. And that sound is the only department that has that difference. Every single show, every single performance is different. So even if you've seen a show a million times, I've seen Hamilton hundreds of times now. And there are some actors that I want to go out front and mix them because that one actor options up one note that no one else does. And I have to hear it out front because it sounds so good and it gives you chills. And that's why sound, because it's a mystery to everyone. It is something that requires more talent and skill and brains and ingenuity and perfectionism than any other profession I have ever encountered in my entire life. It is one of those things that I every day I come into work and I have a new problem to solve is the day I love coming to work. When it's the business as usual is the part that I hate. So that's why sound. Every day is a new day.
Can you give me an example of some of the unusual problems that you had to solve? Like what's memorable?
Every actor wears their microphone slightly different, and we always have our bag of tricks. There's clips and rubber bands and gasketing and tape and all that stuff. And I didn't come up with this idea. It was actually I was doing a show in Japan, and if you've ever been to Japan and interacted with the Japanese people, they are the most hardworking, most ingenious people I've ever met in my entire life. Like I want to move there. They are incredible, and they I was doing a show and everyone on stage is dripping. They are wet constantly. and we were using all Mickey 2s, MKE 2s, Sennheisers, and they're great mics. They're really water resistant, but they still get sweat in them. And the A2 on the show, every day he would wrap the head of the mic in like this weird like absorbent pad and then tape on the outside. And every single performance, that padding and like tape and all that had to get changed. And it was this like, the only way to solve the problem is to soak it up before it gets in the microphone. And that guy did that every day. And I think we had somewhere in the neighborhood of like 40 wireless. So every day between shows too, he would cut off all the tape, rewrap it all, because it was the only solution to that problem. The other ways you can see, like I didn't come up with this, but the microphone rigs that we use on Hamilton, they needed a way to get a certain type of mic as close to the mouth as possible and how to make it custom rigged. So they used piano wire, which is really smart, and like a jig for all that. And then instead of taping it or gluing it, they came up with a system where they use incredibly thin, almost invisible fishing line to wrap the mic onto the boom. And there's Annalee Craig is the A2 on the Broadway show. And she's the one that came up with it. We actually call her mic rigs the ALC specials because they are, made by her. They were like thought up by her. And it's like a brilliant system that now I will take with me forever. Like anytime I do a show and I need to get a microphone right here on someone, and I've got 45 minutes and I've got my A2 kit, I am making that mic rig for them because it works flawlessly. It is customizable. It is custom fit to the ear, so it's comfortable. A few pieces of tape and that thing never comes off. And it is brilliant. It's a brilliant solution to a problem that sure could be solved by a manufacturer with some customizable rig that's, kind of piecemeal. And there's other manufacturers that do a similar rig, but they're big and they're clunky and they're visible and they're not great. That rig is beautiful, streamlined, gorgeous. No one's going to complain about it. It is as small as humanly possible. You can see the microphone more than you can see the rig. That's how brilliant this is. And that solution is this. Somebody just used fishing line, glue, and wire to make something that is perfect. Yeah. Look her up. Annalee Craig. She is brilliant.
I will definitely look her up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's and that's the kind of stuff that I love about sound too, is that you meet these really, really intelligent people who come up with these really out of the box solutions that I always love watching. Like I've started to get into a lot of movie sound and like doing production and location sound, and those solutions to problems come in handy on a set when you're like, all right, we need to do this thing. And we were filming, we wanted to get an overhead crane style shot. And out of the box thinking, I was like, well, my boom pole, the threading on my boom pole fits the bottom of the gimbal rig that we were using. So I was like, well, if we screw that on there, we can boom pole it up like a fishing pole and maybe get the crane shot. And we got the shot. We did it in the one take. It worked. And it was just like, well, a crazy solution to something is sometimes just screw it onto the end of it and you're done, and that's the kind of solutions that come in most often. I've seen people use tape and gaff tape and tie line in theater in ways that would boggle the mind.
Tell me more. You have to tell me more.
Oh, we've let's see. I've got some other good ones. We there's in like movie gaffing, there's this stuff they have called speed rail. And I was doing a show I was on tour with Les Mis actually, and I was in Detroit. And Detroit, before they stopped doing it, Detroit had a really great movie set up there where it was very cheap to film. So they filmed all the Transformers movies there. They filmed a few other movies, and it was really great for the people of the IATSE workers that were working in Detroit because they got a lot of work for it. And I was talking to one of the guys who was a gaffer on the set, and the gaff on a movie set is just like, he's the problem solver. He's the guy who rigs the light rig. We need to put a light right here facing down. He's like, great, give me 35 minutes. And he goes to his truck and he gets clamps and pipes and fittings and all this stuff. And he cobbles this thing together, and it's this crazy thing. You need to mount a camera on the side of a car. This guy's got suction cups and things that you remove something and the bolt bolts into it. And you can go online on filmtools.com. It's a great website. And there's if you Google, if you search in Film Tools, baby pin, baby pin is this like fitting end, and it fits into a lot of things. The number of things that is attached to the other end of that baby pin is staggering. They have putty knives, just because if you shove a putty knife into where a door closes, you can hang a light there. If you've got no room, you can jam a light into the door frame of a door with this putty knife thing. And I was like, he showed me this website, and I was blown away by it. I was like, this is incredible. And now I make all my camera rigs off of that stuff, because it's all little, like, it's like adult erector sets. It's like, oh, you get a 3/8 fitting to a baby pin receptacle, to a 3/8 stud that you can screw something onto. And I bought a bunch of like clamps and things to clamp together, because I might want to put a camera somewhere that's weird. And so I do that. And on Les Mis, that's what we built our center camera rigs, because we had 3 cameras at front of house. One was a black and white pan tilt zoom, so that the stage manager could see things very specifically as he wanted to cue the show off of, because it was really dark. So he wanted something that he had a little more control over, that wasn't just a full stage color shot. Then we had a full stage HD color shot, and then a black and white shot that saw in the dark. And every time we would mount these cameras on a balcony rail, we would have to put 3 separate camera mounts, mount the cameras and aim them. And I was like, this is stupid. We got to make one thing. And so we went online and we bought this stuff, and I cobbled it all together, and you just go to the front of the balcony rail, you clamp it on there, and you're done. And that's it. And it's like still to this day my favorite rig I've ever made, because it was big. It was a big stupid camera, and it always worked. It was great. The other fun things we've done is like using like the clips that people use them on. There's this guy in New York, Jake Scudder, and he was showing me this rig because they came up with, they were doing Bullets Over Broadway, and they had a lot of hats in Bullet Over Broadway. And generally in theater, you put the microphone in a hat if the character's wearing the hat, and then when they take it off, they still have their regular rig. Well, that would have meant that everyone in the show, they would have had to double the amount of mics that they had, and that didn't work. So they thought, well, maybe we run the cable through to a quick release, and then we would have 2 different cables, and you would just switch the cable between the hat rig and the head rig. And that wasn't really working well. So Jake came up with this hair clip idea, where it's a standard toupee clip that you see on a lot of mic rigs are rigged that way. But instead of using elastic, it had some magnets attached to it. And the magnets they had the polarity fixed, so that when you attach the other magnet to it, it snapped it in the correct orientation. And then they attached the same style of rig to the inside of the hat. And then the microphone had he made this jig that would jig out the 2 magnets on the microphone end. So then the actor, when they wanted to put the mic in their hair, they snapped it on there, snapped on. And then when they needed to put it in the hat, they unsnapped it, and it just came off like a magnet. Let it go, it snapped onto the hat. And you didn't have to have twice as many wireless. And that's a brilliant solution that just involved some magnets, some heat shrink, some glue, and some help from wardrobe. And bam, you're having the amount of wireless you needed, which on Broadway is a big deal because they're all condensed together. It's really hard to get channels. So that was their solution. And still to this day, I think of that in the back of my mind. I'm like, remember that, because someday you're going to need to do this stupid thing with magnets, and you're going to have to call Jake Scudder and be like, hey, remember that thing? How did you do that thing again?
the way, Mark, what exactly do you do as A2? I'm pretty sure that not many people understand your, responsibilities.
The A2 is more of the, I always think of myself as like, I'm the problem solver during a show. So it is my responsibility to know what every single thing plugs into. So if you ask me, Mark, I've lost comm in this place. I need to know where that chain goes to get to the right spot to plug it back in when it gets unplugged. So I research everything about our show. I know every in and out bolt. I know every cable. I know what every label says because I've looked at everything. That's number one, is you have to be a good problem solver and a good troubleshooter. Sometimes that means calling your boss or calling your friend who knows a lot about that thing and you rely on them. But for the most part, it's all about, the camera is down. How do we get the camera back up? Number two is I do all of the mic riggings for the show. So I build all of the custom rigs that we have. In Hamilton, we use 4 different types of mics. We use 2 from DPA, 1 from Sennheiser, and 1 from Point Source Audio. And depending on the character that's being played and the hairstyle of the actor that's playing it, we have various different custom rigs. So at any given time, an actor could have 4 different mic rigs. So I build all 4 mic rigs. I keep them clean. I keep them repaired. If they start to sound bad, I swap them out. I deal with a lot of the show's expendables. So we go through a lot of tape. We go through a lot of skin prep wipes to prep the skin for tape. And then I also tape on a lot of mics that are it's very important that it get done the right way so that it doesn't fall off. So like every day, my day usually consists of starting the day, turning on all the system, going through my various checks. The front of house engineer obviously does their own. I go through all of my checks. I generally check a lot of the comm and communication systems that our show has, check all of our video to make sure video is working, make sure that it looks nice because sometimes things will fire up in an odd way. I go through all of our microphones and make sure that the correct mic rig is on the transmitter for that actor. So if we have on Hamilton, we notoriously do not have a full company on show. There's always a swing on, or there's always someone being swung out for a day off, or someone's on their vacation or whatever. So we are doing a lot of mic swaps during the day, and then I send those out to get checked by the A1, and then I go down in the pit and check all of our pit mics. Do a lot of checks to front of house for various MIDI communications. So we have a lot of MIDI triggers on our show where the drummer, or the percussionist, excuse me, will trigger sound effects and lighting effects through front of house. So we check to make sure that communication's working. And then go through, check all of our on-stage monitoring with the front of house engineer, and then deliver all the mics. And then usually before the show, about 20 minutes before the show, I go to our Hamilton. I tape Hamilton. Depending on who's on for Burr, tape Burr, Washington, and a few other actors depending on their needs and things like that. Some actors are more self-reliant than others, and so those ones we let them keep going, kicking. And then somebody else who's needs a little help, we help them out. And then before the show starts, do last-minute checks just to make sure that every actor, right before they go on, their mic is working, sounds good, isn't buried under anything, isn't sweated out. And then throughout the show, I have various points where I check to make sure that certain mics that are vitally important to the scene that's coming up are working. And then frequently throughout the show, just listen to every single actor's microphone over and over and over again until I hear one of them sweat it out, which is just, it sounds like they're underwater a little bit. And go and hit them with a can of air or dab it on something. I also have I made a little vacuum system out of a hearing aid cleaner, made a little battery pack for it. And so I use that for all our microphones to suck out all the sweat. And then maybe do some retaping and things like that just to make sure everything's looking nice and properly secured. And then after the show's done, pick up the mics and bring them all back. when we do have a lot of rehearsal days where I'll come in and me and the A1 Anthony will trade off who comes in for rehearsals, and we usually we have a keyboard in the pit already, so we set the keyboard up, get it working on stage, set up some microphones so that the conductor can talk to them while they're rehearsing, and then go through a lot of the constant upkeep that touring needs. So every mic rig, because they're custom and made with fishing line, they get bumped and smashed, and so they're always getting fixed. They're always getting cleaned. I do a lot of small minor repairs on system things, like maybe a cable loom that needs to get repaired or replaced, maybe a spare that needs to get thrown into a cable loom, something like that. And that's the bulk of my job. When we load in and out, I am responsible for everything that is proscenium onto the stage. So the mix engineer generally takes care of everything proscenium forward. I take everything proscenium back. We're very lucky that we also have an advanced crew that is top dollar. We have one of the best advanced crews I think I've ever seen. And so we have an extra two guys that we have that always travel with us just for load-in and loadouts that do the pit setup and teardown and the surround system that we put out for every show. And then we also have a great system engineer who comes out and tunes the system very specifically in a very specific way that the designer wants, who's just great. It's got Greg. And then yeah, and I'm more of during a load-in, a crew head to run the crew to set up the cabling and all that. And then I train a local to do a very small track that's catching some wireless and doing some various other swaps. But most of my job primarily is troubleshooting and problem solving.
What is it like to be on tour for such a long time?
It is fun. I tell people all the time, they're like, you're going to want to get off the road someday. And I'm like, I'm sure of that. I love hotels. I know other people don't. They love to have their own home. I don't love schlepping around suitcases. But one thing I'll say is I love meeting new people. And I get to do that every day of my life. Every day I meet someone new. And sometimes that's a crew of 12 guys that I've never worked with in a city I've never been. Sometimes it's a few guys here and there if it's a city I have been. But sometimes it's just going to a new city and meeting a new bartender, meeting a new bar fly at a bar. You can go to the same city 100 times. And I feel like when people live there, they never leave their homes. I mean, I know there's a pandemic, but I'm currently staying in Washington, D.C., and it's one of the most incredibly gorgeous cities ever. And I've been here 3 times now and still rediscovering new things because there's always something new to look at. There's always something new to find and to discover about a city that is maybe, I always love the nightlife. I love going out and having drinks in bars and eating nice food in nice restaurants. But I also just love going to places and saying, wow, that's a really great skate shop. I'd love to go there. And one of the most fun things I just started taking up was photography. And I've discovered that some cities I love to just go out on a skateboard or a scooter or a bicycle and walk around and see what the city has. Because I think a lot of times when you live somewhere for a very long time, you just never really go down the street very often. You get in your car and you drive to the amusement thing that you wanted to go to, and you don't necessarily walk down to the corner store and meet the guy who works there. I have met anyone that sells Red Bull in the surrounding area of every theater in America that I've been to. I've met the guy that works there, and that's the coolest thing I think is meeting cool regular people, and that is something that's never going to get old for me. So I think I could keep touring for as long as my body will hold out. It also I used to be not a pack rat, but I used to, collect everything. And when I started going on tour, I decided to give up having a home, and I have not paid rent on a house in years. And I love living small. I have a friend I've done a few tours with, Danny Taylor. She's a carpenter, and she finally decided to get off the road, sort of, and lives now in Rhode Island, and she loves it. And she's there with her boyfriend, and they have a great life together. But she was always one of those people that she had everything she had could fit in the overhead bin of an airplane. That was like all of her things. And I loved that idea of just having, I mean, maybe not everything, but for the most part. And I love that idea. I love being able to live out of a suitcase. Me and my girlfriend, when we moved here, we just, we moved in. That was it. That was what we did. And I didn't want to unpack my suitcase. I didn't know how long we were going to be here, but I loved knowing where my stuff was. It was in a bag right there. And I love that. You do miss some of the comforts, the creature comforts of home. It's nice to do laundry in your own washer and dryer and not at a laundromat. But as someone who kind of grew up not in the wealthy side, I'm not opposed to laundromats. I love them. So that never bothered me. And having lived here in DC now for a few weeks, I like it. I can see the appeal of staying in one place for a long time. I just the other day, thanks to our lovely production sound engineer, he sent me all of my toolboxes that were on the tour, because the trucks just got dumped for temporary storage. And he was like, "Do you want any of your personal things out of there?" And I was like, "Yes, send me all of my recording equipment, please." And I have boxes and boxes and boxes of microphones and interfaces and cables and all this stuff. And I love having that with me, because I love the opportunity to make a recording of some cool thing. But honestly, I don't miss having a lot of stuff. And so touring gets you to live a lean life that I think lets you appreciate later when you're gonna buy a piece of furniture, or you're gonna buy some pots and pans. The other day I bought an air fryer on Amazon, and I love it, and I don't want to take it with me, but I have more of an appreciation for it, I think, because I've lived 3 years with not really getting to cook my own meals very often, and not really getting to experiment with foods and things like that. So that's some of the things you miss. But I love eating out. I love going to restaurants and tasting something someone has made. I don't know how to eat a lot of, or I don't know how to make a lot of noodle dishes, but I get to go out every day and get a noodle dish on tour, because I'm getting a per diem and I can experience that. So I think it has, for the most part, given me a much broader sense of the way the world is. I eat now. I grew up in California, and I grew up eating fast food, and now I eat, much more exotically. I appreciate much more exotic foods than I would have as a younger adult, and I think that's 100% due to touring. There's the best thing you can do with your money is travel. And I am lucky that I have gotten to go to every US state, Mexico, Canada, Japan, and China, all on someone else's dime. I think I've paid for 2 trips. And that's immensely lucky. There are places I love to visit, and Schenectady, New York is one of those places I'm always excited to go, because I love the people there. And I would have never have gone to Schenectady, New York. I have no reason to go there. No reason to visit there. There's nothing to visit there. But touring lets you go to these places, and you can really discover these incredible gems. You can also discover the cities that you never want to go to again. But that's the thing. That's the biggest takeaway for me is I am a better person. I'm a better human of the world, because I have met farmers, and I have worked with them, and I have met I've gone to Idaho and I've met the just super interesting people that live in Idaho, and I would have never have visited Idaho if it had not been for a show. And met some really great people that I'm still friends with. There's I have a friend that's from Vermont, and I only visited Vermont because he's from there, and I met him on tour. And so I think if you want to travel the world and have someone else pay for it, tour theater, because you get to go to the just most interesting places. I've been to Japan and stayed in a hotel I would never be able to afford because they wanted to see Dreamgirls. So I got to do that. So yeah, that's the best part of touring. The things you get to see along the way. The job is the job, but it's the lunches you have with the people that you meet.
Oh, that sounds incredible.
It is. It is amazing.
By the way, when you're on tour, do you usually use your own bus or a plane? Like Hamilton, Angelica?
It varies dramatically from tour to tour or day to day and week to week. I've been on tours where we had our own bus and we could leave things on that bus, and we had sleeper bunks on that bus. And it was great because we could, you go in there and you get into your bed that's got your sheets on it. Um, and then sometimes I've been on a tour. My very first tour was Peter Pan with Kathy Rigby, and it was a great tour because we had a true travel day on Monday. So we didn't load in on Monday. We would load out Sunday night, and then Monday we would travel, and we would always fly because we had the time, and it was cheaper to fly than it would be to rent a bus. I think it's like somewhere in the realm of like $10,000 to rent a bus to travel.
Oh.
Yeah, it's insane. Or something like that. I might be getting that. I might be completely throwing crazy numbers out, but I know it's very expensive. And we traveled by plane, and I at the time had not flown. I think I had taken. No, I think that had been my first flight. Was that tour? I had never flown before. And I didn't even know it. My first flight was like a Southwest flight, and I got on it, and I was like, "Oh, I'm sitting in the front. Is this first class?" And you just don't know anything, and it's cool. And then I learned that I hate flying. It's just they cram you on a little tin can, and everyone's banging into each other, and no one has any manners, and everyone's yelling at the stewardess or the flight attendant, and the flights are always delayed. You're never on time. And security is terrible. And then the first tour bus I got to take, and it was a sleeper bus, I loved it. I was like, you're telling me we get there in the same amount of time it takes to fly. Like we, are not exactly the same amount of time, but we would get on this bus. I would fall asleep. I would wake up, and we would be where we were. And I couldn't, because I don't sleep very well on planes. I would always be tired when we get off planes. I would wake up fully rested in a new city with all of my things, not having to wait at baggage claim, not having to go through security. And I was like, this is touring. This is the best touring. And then I've had everything in between. It's been a mix of it. Like Les Mis, we would mostly tour by bus. A lot of times we would have flights. And most of the time, busing was a necessity because we would get out of loadout at like 6 a.m. or something like that. And then we would load back in at 8 a.m. on Monday. Or maybe later, but like depending on the situation. So if we had to fly, that meant we were not sleeping that entire night. And we were going from a difficult, time-consuming, mental heavy action, like loading out to making sure everything goes right, to then 2 days of loading in. And it was always a nightmare. But those precious days when we got to get on a sleeper bus and go to bed were the best. And sleeper buses, no one tells you this, sleeper bus bunks are very tiny. And I'm a very small man. I'm only 5'8", and I don't take up much room. And when you close the drape on your bunk, all you hear is the cab of the truck. You just hear rah, 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 rah. And it's air conditioned, and there's no light, and it feels like a coffin. And I sleep like a baby in that. And so tour bus days, I got the best sleep of my life on a place I'd never been. And I am chasing that dream. If I ever get off the road, I think I might just buy a coffin and sleep in it because it is great. Um, and that's primarily how we get around. So every once in a while, we will do they call it a sit-up bus where there's not bunks, and those are okay. They're usually really uncomfortable, and you get out of it with your back all messed up. Um, but it's similar to flying. But that's the primary way. You almost never drive in a car, and uh, but if you're going to travel in a way, I highly recommend sleeper bus.
Do you prank each other?
Do we prank each other? Not like I feel like younger days you do, and then the older you get, you don't because you don't want to uh, upset someone who's really tired and just wants to go to bed. I have had some where they've pranked people. I was on Blue Man Group on one of my first tours, and there was a guy on that tour who was just the funniest guy we've ever had around, and he came up with this prank that he called 50-mile-an-hour jelly. And the whole premise of it was he was going to stick his head out the back window of the bus. And you were going to go out to the front. And they have those jellies. Do you have that? I don't know if you have that in Canada, but the squeezed jelly. It's like a
Yeah.
mustard bottle, but it's jelly. He's like, you're going to take the jelly to the front of the bus. You're going to go out that window and you're going to squeeze the jelly at me. And I'm going to catch it in my mouth. And no one tells. This guy. I think Jason was the guy who went up to the front that he was pranking. And Jason's out in the front and he's squeezing this jelly out as hard as he can. 50 miles an hour winds blowing past him, and the other guy's in the back of the bus and he's got his head out the window and he's screaming, send it, because the wind, what no one tells you is the wind just like hugs the bus. So the jelly was just slamming against the side of the bus and not going down the bus. But he's screaming at this guy to send that jelly. And then, of course, that guy then has to clean the jelly off the side of the bus when you're done. That was a good prank. I've heard of people doing stuff like leaving stuff in people's bunks and stuff like that. But for the most part, we don't. People prank each other on tour all the time. My first tour, we had Kathy Rigby, who is just one of the most spectacular human beings that's ever walked the face of the planet, most giving human being I've ever met. And she loved pranking people all the time. She had bags she had like chalk bags almost on the sides of her that were full of they called it fairy dust. And it was this Mylar cut squares. And she would throw it in the air and it would catch the light, it would sparkle, and it was magical. And you would find it in your sock drawer 3 years later. It was everywhere. You couldn't get rid of this stuff. And she loved to sprinkle it on people, to put it in your pants. She would grab your pants, open it, and dump a handful of it in there. Someone told me they had this one position on the tour for a local to do. It was one of the window guys. They would open the windows at the beginning of the show when she would enter, and then they would close it. One of the road guys was on one window, and they would always have a local on the other. And he would always go. Our deck carpenter would always go to the head carpenter of the theater and say, "Who do you want? Who do you like the least? Put him on the window position." And they'd be like, "Why?" And they're like, "Because he's gonna get pranked." And Kathy would always, right before they were about to open, for the last time, they would open the window and she would kind of poke her head out. She would reach into her pocket, grab a handful of fairy dust and just dump it. Whatever was left in the bag, dump it all over this guy. And one time it happened where the guy he had his head shaved and he was sweating, covered in sweat. And they said at the end of it, he looked like a disco ball because he was just covered in silver Mylar. So that's kind of pranks we do. They're usually well-spirited. A lot of like inflatable things. You hide stuff in people's things all the time. On Les Mis, our carpentry team had a prank where they would hide a cut thimble off of a bad piece of rigging steel. So it was just like a horribly sharp piece of wire rope, and they would hide it in each other's bags all the time. And you'd always knew who had it before, and you like, oh, they're coming. I can't leave my backpack out. They'll put it in there. And that was the kind of pranks that they would do all the time, is they would hide stupid things in each other's things, which I always loved. It was always great. Not a ton of pranking, but the ones are always well mannered, I would say.
What's your favorite show, Mark?
What's my favorite show? I obviously have to say Hamilton, because I'm on it. It is the greatest piece of art I have ever witnessed, and I honestly can say this with some assuredness. There has never been a musical I've ever watched where the actor playing a part didn't matter. Like, it's always mattered. The person is the part. But Hamilton, the writing stands on its own so well that I think you would enjoy reading the Hamilton musical script. Like, it's so smart. There's so many things. The choreography is just bananas good. There is never anything done without intention. When you see the show, I tell people this all the time. They're like, wow, I loved the show. And I go, great, come and see it 10 more times. Just look somewhere else, because you're going to see somebody doing something you didn't see before that has meaning. And it's bonkers. And I always love to talk Hamilton with people, because I have a very scandalous viewpoint of Hamilton. I think that Hamilton, the character Hamilton, is a villain, and that Burr is that Eliza is the hero. If you want later, we can go into full detail. I can give you my whole conspiracy theory on why I think that. But it's that deep of a show that you can have conspiracy theories about it, because it's based in fact. It was well written as a book originally, and then it was really well written as a musical, and by certified geniuses, people that have been given money because they're smarter than your average person. And so I think in terms of like the quality of a show, I've never worked on a show that had so many elements to it that were so breathtaking. Favorite show I've ever worked on is Les Mis. It was a shot out of a cannon experience. I've never been so tired in my entire life. Every week we would sleep. There were 3 days we didn't sleep. We called them schmooze days, because it was the Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, loading out, loading in, never stop working, exhausted all the time. But I made some of the best friends I've ever met on that show. I have never worked with more talented, thoughtful, conscious actors who, when you're doing theater, a lot of times people don't realize a smart actor is not a good actor. A smart actor is a smart actor. A good actor does the part well, and they sing the part the way they are supposed to sing it, and they say the lines the way they're supposed to sing it. That's a good actor. A smart actor is an actor who sees what's happening and pivots and does things. And I have never seen a group of people pivot and adjust to things as quickly as they have, and do so as if that's what they were being paid to do. Like, they always say, did you see I grabbed that thing off the ground? And I'm like, yes, you did. It was broken. There was glass. And we didn't stop the show because you scooped it up. And that was an entire cast of that. Like, truly, I was one of the greatest moments of theater I've ever experienced was we were in Dallas, Texas. We were going into I can't remember the name of the scene. I believe it's called like the confrontation, not the confrontation, but it's the scene where Thénardier's gang tries to rob Valjean's house, and they go there and they all get fought off by Eponine. And in that moment, they all enter, and our Thénardier didn't hear where the show was. He didn't know where we were in the show. And he wasn't on stage, and he's got the first line. And all of the actors look around at each other and they say, ugh. And there, one actor on stage, luckily wearing a mic, was even programmed into that scene, just starts saying the lines because he was a Thenardier cover. So he just became Thenardier for a moment. And it almost worked out perfectly. Like one guy said a weird thing, and so it was like it didn't quite work out in like the throughput. If you're really paying attention, you would have been like, what was that? Was that a different guy? But they did that. It was a show that Heather was mixing, and she throws up the fader for Thenardier, nothing. She hears someone talking and goes, oh, that's John. And so she brings up his line. And so she just mixes the show as if John is now Thenardier. She's giving him both Thenardier's lines and his own. And it would have been a quiet nightmare because you don't stop the show. Or do you stop the show? What do we do? People would have just been watching just amateur hour. Instead, we had these actors who were like, pivot, that's Thenardier. Now we're doing that. They run off the stage, high fives, people are hugging. They were like, yes, we beat this thing. We something happened and we got over it. There was a scene, it's like it still causes me anxiety. I was mixing the show, and the way our console was set up, it didn't advance the cue correctly. And so it advanced in one list, but not in the list that I was mixing on. So I hit go, nothing happened. And so I hit go again, and it fired an extended cue. And what it did was it fired a sound effect, the gunshot that kills Epony. And everyone goes, oh God. And there's a moment where I'm supposed to kill her. I'm supposed to shoot her. And I couldn't reset things in time. And they just went on without me. They didn't complain. No one said anything to me. They all walked over to me and they said, oh, you must have been heartbroken. You must have been so upset. Like nobody gave me a hard time because they were all in it for the art. And they knew we were all in this together. And you know what? There are worse things than a misfired gunshot because people were there to see the show as a whole, not to hear that gunshot placed correctly. So that show, as far as like experiences goes, I've never seen a harder working group of people put on a better show that I've ever seen. The first time we did an on stage Sitzprobe, which is very rare during tech. It's like something you never do. And it was some of the most moving music I've ever heard sung by the best singers. I've never heard people sing better. I will still to this day say that Nick Cartel, our Valjean at the time, is one of the greatest actors, greatest singers I've ever heard. And that guy is the nicest person you'll ever meet. And so that show, working on that, truly, I think it will be hard to beat. Someone will have to like hand me a gold bar on my first day because I've never worked with a better group of people in my life. And that's really what theater is. There's a stage manager I love, Eric Teisinger, and he says theater is a collaborative art. And it's true in that moment. Everyone collaborated on that show to make it the best they could. And if you needed something from them to make it a little bit better, to fix a small little idiosyncrasy, they were there to do that. They were there to help you with that. And I loved it. And they did it without complaining. I mean, they had their thoughts on matters, but nobody ever couldn't go on with the show. They always went on. And it was great. That experience to me shows me what theater can actually become if you're working with the right people. And I think that's the problem in a lot of theater that I've worked on that I haven't enjoyed is the people that you're working with are not collaborative. They're not in it to help you. They're in it to help themselves. They're in it to make sure that they're right on the money. And so if you hire the right people who are collaborating, you will end up with a piece of art that people will not only want to see again and want to pay for it again, but they will never forget it and they will never stop telling people about it. And that is really what we're making. We're making experiences. That's why you can go buy the 25th anniversary album of Les Mis. It's a great album. And people were leaving the shows, going to our concession stand and asking, do you guys have a copy of them? Because they're what I want to hear again. And that's the kind of magic you can't bottle. You can't record it. You can't archive it, because it isn't about one performance. It's about the 10 performances or the 100 performances. The way someone grows as an artist. There's the gentleman who plays the king on our show. He recorded his first announcement because the king announces the show. He does the, ladies and gentlemen, this is your king, George III. And it's a great speech, and he does it well. And, and when they're first going into the role, they record their speech. And his first speech was good. It really is. It sounds good. It's well acted, well directed. And then we redid the speech, and we were, I was kind of confused as to why are we, it's the same words. Why do we use a new one? The old one was fine. And I was talking to him about it, and I was like, it's so funny how different they sound. And he goes, oh yeah, now I've figured out who the king is after hundreds of shows. And his king is beautiful. It's funny. It's everyone who sees it, they that's their favorite part of the show is they love the king. They laugh, they scream, they clap. They clap before they ever hear a word of his, because his announcement is so funny that the first time he walks out, they know what's coming. And that's it, is the first time you see someone is going to be different than the last time you see someone. The last performance of that show is going to be miles different than the first performance. And so if theater keeps going, it is all about the journey. And I think touring a show lets you see the journey. I think a lot of times when you sit down on a show, they do the same part every time, and they do their part. And you can shake it up a little bit, but really, for the most part, shows are the same. On a tour, you have different people playing it a lot of times, but also you have different people experiencing different things. And sometimes you get the magic of somebody does a line in a show and it doesn't get a laugh. And you see that actor try his hardest to change the part to make it get a laugh, and it never does. And you watch them actually do it worse. Or not worse, but it's not as good as the first time they did it. Like the way they had it was nailing it. It's just the audience is bad, or the audience doesn't get the joke or whatever. I always say the audience isn't bad. It's just they don't get the joke. But the hardest thing you can watch is a performance in Fort Myers, Florida. Actually, Naples, Florida. Naples is a beautiful town. I met a woman there that I absolutely, the most endearing woman I ever met. Love the people there. They do not clap, ever. The whole show. Show-stopping numbers. Maybe a smattering of applause. End of the show, they're on their feet, they're clapping, they loved it. They were quietly watching the whole time. Michigan's like that. We were in Michigan and we were like, why does no one clap? Does no one clap in Michigan? Do people not laugh out loud in Michigan? What's going on? And then we would go from a city that was like loving it. They were laughing at everything. They were eating it up and we were enjoying it. And I truly believe like the better an audience is, the better a show you get. If someone walks out and you clap, they will sing their heart out for you. If they sing the greatest rendition of a song they've ever sung and you don't even hoot or holler, they're not going to give you their A game come the second song. So I love touring because you get to see the difference in audiences. You get to see the difference in performance spaces. It sounds different to the actors, and so they react in kind. And it is a vastly different show. When we did Hamilton in Philadelphia, it was very intimate and very human, and you felt like you could reach out and touch the actor. And then you would do it in Dallas, Fort Worth, in Dallas Music Hall. And if you're sitting in the balcony, you're struggling to even see the actor. It's that far away. So that performance sort of changes, I think, a little bit with some people, you know, and that I think is the kind of the benefit of touring is the actors are different every show every day, and they grow every show every day, and you're never going to have the same show. So striving for that is impossible. You are always going to have a good show or a great show, depending on how well you can pivot. And I think that you only get that from touring. You only get that from having to pivot.
Is there anything you would like to talk about before we finish?
No, I'm talking myself ragged.
Unless you want to talk about Eliza and Hamilton.
Oh yes, this can be Hamilton after hours. Throughout the show, like I hope I don't get fired for this. Throughout the show, there are many pivotal moments in Hamilton's life that lead to sadness. And in the show, when you watch it, you focus a lot on Hamilton's relationship with the Sons of Liberty and how they come together to show England that they can become a colony and that they're fighting for their independence. And that's something we can all subscribe to. And the great thing about well-written characters is they are not perfect. They are flawed. And so Burr is flawed. Throughout the show, it's sort of shown that Burr is wishy-washy. He doesn't stand for anything. And finally, when he does stand for something, it's just to get a seat at the table. And, you know, him standing for something is not righteous. And so Hamilton doesn't endorse him. And I hope I'm not spoiling this for anyone when they watch it. But it really, when you watch it, you notice that Hamilton, as great as he is, a lot of the tragedy that happens in Hamilton's life, especially to his family, happens directly as a result of Hamilton's guidance. His troubled relationship with his wife, his son's death, his own relationship with George Washington and the struggles that they have during the war with things like that, him not wanting to just listen to George Washington and you know, he wants what he wants. And Eliza is the hero because in the end of the show, the hardest thing for a hero to do, or for anyone to do, and if anyone disagrees with me, please reach out to me via email. The hardest thing for anyone to do is forgive someone. It is truly the bellwether of a good person is to forgive. And she sings an entire song about how she's going to burn letters and no one's going to ever ask her what she thinks of him, and she's not going to be in his story. And in the end of the show, she forgives him and she pivots and she says, I'm going to tell his story and here's how. And in the end of the show, she tells all about the pretty amazing things she did for all those guys. You know, she told the story of the Sons of Liberty. She told the story of George Washington. She's the reason that George Washington Monument is here. She is very pivotal in a lot of. She started an orphanage in New York, one of the first public orphanages in New York, private orphanages in New York. She's done an immense amount after his death, and through telling his story. Because she finally forgave him, and in the end of the show, you know, like she's the last person. She's it. She's the center stage. She finally gained her. I don't know. People talk about what the moment is, you know, at the end, but she's the true hero of the story, because she's the one who helps things along in reality. So that's my. I also think Burr is not the villain. Burr is the misunderstood main character. His life is tattered at the end, and even he at the end says, there was room enough for both of us. So in the end of the movie, even he changes his mind. If you look at the story of Hamilton, he writes a letter saying, I'm gonna shoot. I'm gonna aim my gun up in the air and shoot. I'm not gonna shoot Burr. If he shoots me, such and such. And really, it's like that's kind of a messed up thing to do. So like even in his death, he's kind of a messed up guy. So come at me, fans, all you want, but Hamilton's the villain, Eliza's the hero.